Hello, everyone. Welcome to Streaming Alchemy. I'm John Mahoney. And on today's show, we're going to take a look at how you can generate a prompter feed that you can return to remote presenters when they're part of a virtual event or other type of remote production. And this will give your speakers a better sense of confidence about what they want to say and running through a pre set up script, but it will also make it easier for your audience where they would get something that would be more focused as a delivery and that would keep them more engaged. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. Before we do that though, I want to invite everybody, if you have any questions, comments, just post them and we'll try to get to them live on the show. Also, if you would like to call in and join us on air, any questions, we have the link here and in the show notes as well. So please, happy to have you come in and be part of the show as well. So let's get started. And what I'd like to show you is let's look at what we're going to be providing as potential feeds back to a remote presenter. So if I switch over here, what we have now is, this is just a general setup I have, but we have two things that you can send back to a presenter. So we'll start here. They can get a control room feed. This video up here is what will be going back to the presenter. They can get a control room feed so an operator could talk to them and engage with them. Or they could get a feed. In this case, I just have this as standby, sort of a guest wall. If you had lots of people in an audience and you set them up in some sort of wall position, you would get this type of thing. And then from here, since this is up full screen, I have the ability to say, I want to actually lay the prompter on top of this so they can sort of make contact, visual contact with the guest on the wall, or I can turn it off. So if they are just there speaking, doing an introduction, sort of pre-presentation, I have that. So we have the two abilities. One is the wall or the control room. And even in the control room, say you want to do something where you're just doing this as a pre-recorded thing from somebody remote, you could have the control room prompting somebody and then have them speak over, do the prompt, and then this would come back and they would be able to engage that way. So it could be a pre-recorded segment that you may be doing, but the participant happens to be remote. So a couple of different ways we're doing this. As you saw, we are using vMix for this. And we're using a piece of software that we use internally when we do pre-recorded videos called PromptSmart. And I'll dive into that in a second. But before that, I just want to go over and look at the comments and see what we have. So we have James Redmond is here. So James, William Warren is from Denver, Colorado. William, thanks for joining us. I appreciate it. James, thank you. And hopefully, you find this useful. So we'll go through as much detail as you need. Okay, so what I want to start with then is, since the PromptSmart is something that most of you probably haven't heard of, let me give you a quick look at this. And this is basically our interface. So it has, some of the scripts and other stuff we've done in here. So this is PromptSmart. Let me jump back. Basically, what PromptSmart lets you do is you can create folders. You can create scripts and put these scripts inside folders. But one of the nice things about the way PromptSmart works for us, if I go into here, this is the script that I'm using for today's show. You see here that not only can you have like a single script, which you're used to in a traditional prompter setting, but the way it lets you break it up is you can do what they call stories. So if I wanted to do different presenter segments, you could make each presenter have their own script here and set that up. So if I just said I want to add a new story, I can just go edit that, put this in, and then just switch between whichever presenter I'm at now and make sure their correct script is loaded. So it's really nice for doing that type of stuff. The other thing it lets you do, which is really handy, is that when I create a script, I can turn around and say, which monitor, like if I have multiple monitors and one of them is from my prompter, I can say, which monitor do I want to show this on? And you can just change this dynamically. So I can come in here and say, I want to, choose it. This is on screen 1, so that's where we have it set up. But this is, so I can go to any one of my screens and have that set up, and it will play out to that screen. It also allows me to think about things in terms of what individual presenters could want. So for me, I picked my font for this script and the point size that I want, because that's easy for me to read and keep pacing. Somebody else over here could have a totally different set of requirements. So script by script, you can set up the visual look of how you want this to be handled. But perhaps the real killer feature in this is that it allows me to drive the script using a microphone. So as opposed to having to have somebody that would be operating the prompter, where they're sort of pacing against the speaker and then sliding this the prompter up and down for the scroll, you can actually turn around and say, I actually want you to take this prompter and drive it based on the speaker voice that's coming in. So really, really powerful and ideal for this type of situation where you have somebody that is remote, because it makes it easier and makes it easier to use this type of functionality in a smaller production where you may not have a dedicated prompter operator, when you want somebody to be able to pay attention to what you have going on with the actual show and what you need to do. Because usually virtual events are more complex productions. There's a lot of moving elements in here, both networking and workflow wise. So just something to keep in mind. There are a lot of nice features in this. This is just where this is not a sponsorship or anything. We just paid for this ourselves, but we've really liked it. And it starts at $99 a year. So it's not unreasonable if you could leverage this in your productions. The other thing about it, by the way, is that it has a sort of a cloud component. So I can make edits at one station and then just say sync it up, and I'll be able to pick them up here and use them. So different production workflow things that make this a very nice choice as well. So that's how we have everything set up with this. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to jump into the vMix preset piece, and we can start to look at how that would all come together and how we start to integrate PromptSmart into vMix to make this remote video feed. So let me slide this out of the way here. So what I have set up here, we'll sort of go through the inputs, and then we can dig in with a little more detail. I have several inputs. Input one is the guest wall, and input 2 is the control room. These would just be more live videos or composited videos of things. And so that's, we'll sort of put those to the side, but those would be those 2 feeds you'd have, probably cameras or other types of composited feeds from something like a Zoom webinar or Zoom meeting, something like that. The next 2 are just videos I pre-recorded to show you a couple of different things with this in action. And I wanted to have something that would make a strong demo for how this all would come together. But now what we're doing at the end is really we're compositing the elements we need to create the return feed. So in this, I have the prompter background. So if you, I'll just start this so you can sort of have something sitting here. So you can see here in this window, I have the prompter feed coming in. If I were to overlay this prompter on this video, it would be too distracting if it were just, video and then text right over it. So what I'm doing here is I'm adding a high contrast layer to this. And this is just in this layer, if I go in for this prompt background, I'm just going and I have the adjustment. I just set the alpha down to 85 from 255. So, like sort of 2/3 of the way down. So that still gives me a clean view of the video that's coming in behind the background, but it still creates really good contrast. And that way, when I have sort of the text, so let me sort of put this here. When I have the text come up over it, you get that high visibility text look. The other thing that we have to do when we do this text, so let me go in here and we'll jump through this. What I have to do is I have to key out the background here. So if I go color key, if I turn the color key off, you can see I have that solid background. But what I'm doing is I would go in, say color key, take the dropper and just click to say that's the color I want. And since it's a solid color, it pulls out a pretty nice key on that. And that gives me the layer that I need in order to create that type of transparency. And the background layer creates the contrast I need, keeping this as a see-through look to the video behind it. So how do I actually handle the feed itself? We do that using a mix. And so for the mix, I have the two types of videos, either the control room video or I have the guest wall video. And so those are the two videos that I can switch between. But then inside the mix, I also have layers. And those layers are my prompter background and my prompter feed. So now I can turn these layers on and off, and I'll show you how I do that in a minute. I can turn these layers on and off, and I can switch. Am I looking at the control room or am I looking at the guest wall? So that gives me this sort of duality. So the first takeaway is that you can actually use layers on top of a mix, and this works very well. They stay over whatever you mix underneath them. So that can be very effective for certain things you want to use. The other is that if you want to do returns, this is, you can end up, and this is another thing that might not be an obvious benefit, but when you start to modify your productions as you go, if I go into outputs over here, I could have, when I selected the output that I wanted to send as a return, I could go in and I could select an input number specifically. But the problem with that is that if I add things or move things around in my vMix preset, that input number is no longer valid. If I set that to a mix, it maps to that mix no matter where I have the input with that mix in my total production. So this can be really useful for other things as well. If you want to have certain outputs set up that no matter what you do to your vMix preset, you always want them to have this specific input, put it in a mix and assign the mix to the output, because that will save you a lot of grief with going back and adding something last minute and then things not working because they're getting the wrong return output. So that's the key things with the inputs. But now, how do we handle driving the audio over to PromptSmart? And the way we do that is we're using something called virtual audio cable, which is, you can get a free version of it where it's just sort of it gives you like two different virtual connections you can have. So it's good for a back and forth signal. But the way I have to set this up is you go to audio outputs, and in your different submixes that you have, your different audio buses, you can assign, not just enable it, but assign a specific physical, or in this case, virtual output that I want to use for that. And that gives you this capability now where I can turn around and say, anything I route to bus B will go out this virtual audio cable. And to sort of counter this, let me stop this for a second and drag this over. So if we go over to this screen, what I have here from my microphone settings is that I am taking the input from this virtual audio cable. So that gives me that complete connection. So the microphone in my prompter is the audio cable coming out from bus B. Now, if I have multiple guests coming in and one of them is presenting at a time, all I need to do is when I select that guest to present, and I could set this up as shortcuts or scripts or other things, but when I select that guest to present, not only do they go out master, but I then have to say, and also go out bus B because you're going to be driving that script. So that can be done sort of as a last minute thing. But if we switch back to what I have over in on the vMix front, here is I have those two videos that I said I'm going to use for my demonstrations. Well, I have those being routed out to bus B as well as to master. And that's what's going to give me that control of the script. So I'm going to, sort of end the main discussion here with a look at a demo of these two different use cases that I have. But before that, I just want to jump in because I think we have a few more comments here that came in. So you demand a good day. I appreciate that, Whit. Thank you. Always good to see you here. And Bo's Promo TV, good to see you again. Thanks for joining us another time. Always welcome that. Okay, so let's see. What I'd probably like to do is, let me get something started here where I will put the guest wall on and I'll turn on the prompter. I think we're all good here. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to play this video. And as I play this, you'll be able to see how the script will track against that. So these were done quickly, so it's not like a flawless delivery, but it should give you a good sense. As a remote presenter, it can be difficult to stay on track when speaking at virtual events. If you keep looking down at notes while you're talking, it can become very distracting to your viewers. And this can break the connection you have with everyone you're talking to and make them feel less engaged. On the other hand, if you choose to present without keeping to a fixed script, you can easily go off on tangents and viewers can end up losing the main focus of your presentation. This is why I'd recommend having the remote studio send a prompter feed to you as part of your return. It can help you be much more effective as a speaker, and it can help keep everyone that you're speaking with more interested and engaged. Okay, so you can see from that it actually does a really good job tracking specifically to the script that we had. But the reason I wanted to show a sort of a second example here is that, let me get this back on, is that lots of times you still have speakers that are going to go off in what I call riff. They just will go off on their own and then eventually come back to the script. So I just want to show you how it would handle that case as well. So let me see here. So I have this, and now I'm going to play the speaker, the presenter, that decides to riff in the middle. As a remote presenter, it can be difficult to stay on track when speaking at virtual events. And if you keep looking down at notes while you're talking, it can become very distracting to your viewers. And this is where I'm just going to break off the script and sort of free-form talk to show that even when you do this, it is possible to get back on track with a remote prompter. Because now I'll start again and say, this can break the connection you have with everyone you're talking to and make them feel less engaged. Okay, so that was the sort of second where I came in, I started off on script, and then I went off on my little story or something I wanted to share, and then jumped back on the script, and it just kept going. So I think as you look at this sort of thing, it gives you an awful lot of control to keep presenters on track. And I'll be honest, there were two main things with that. In addition to just the actual presentation itself, the fact that it becomes, if people just riff too much, it becomes somewhat disorganized and the audience can disconnect. Having the script sort of visible to people through a prompter will also keep them more on time. They may speak faster or slower, which is fine, but it will keep them and your event production on a better schedule. And that's the other thing that a lot of people I've spoken with really end up struggling with, is how do I keep everybody that has a segment sort of on time so we don't run, 45 minutes or an hour over. And I think that's the other real benefit of having a prompter-driven script in front of remote presenters, because it can let you sort of keep that momentum in a production and keep people more in line with time. So that was everything that I wanted to cover in this one. It was a few different points that we made here that I think are sort of really general purpose too, even if you're not going to be doing anything specifically with a prompter. So hopefully you all found this interesting and useful. So what I'd like to do, we'll probably wrap up today's show and I'll jump into the post show. And if you have any other questions or want to talk more about how any of this stuff was organized in the back end or anything else that you want to talk about with production and live streaming, happy to do that. So if you can hang around, that will be fantastic. If you can't, we will be back again in 2 weeks for another show, and we really would love to have you join us. So if you'll be on the post show, see you in a moment. If not, see you in 2 weeks. Be safe, be well. All right, welcome to the post show. Thank you everybody for joining. I really appreciate that. So this was a lot of fun. The concept was really driven by people that I've spoken with who have been producing live virtual events, and came from some of their frustrations. And it really originated from the frustration around people keeping to time. So that sort of motivated the thought for this could be good. So we have Dawit A from Ethiopia. Dawit, thank you very much for joining. I really appreciate that. I know it's probably late Friday night there, so thank you for spending that with us. I really do appreciate it. So, and the other thing is, like I said, there's no sponsorship or anything with PromptSmart. We just found them, and we found it really works well. So the audio, the sort of the audio to speech pattern works great, and it does a good job generalizing things. So if you probably did notice, but in the first time, that first read through of the script where you stayed focused, there were times where I skipped words or changed some phrasing, but kept to the basic script. It could handle that completely, and that was good. So Bo's Prom was asking, do you ever have to use an EDIT emulator to get a tricky HDMI device into the feed? So these EDIT emulators, just so you know, are things that would be related to usually protected content. That's one part of it. Where if something, it will not go down an HDMI feed to a monitor or other device that doesn't have content protection capabilities baked into it. But it also has information about the monitor and the signal and other things. So it can have, these emulators can have two different ways to handle it. So we because we sort of control our environment and we haven't had that, we're not working the same in, like a lot of you are working in actual live virtual production environments. So you may run into this a lot more than we would ever do. But I know people who have used that. The other thing that a lot of people do is a lot of stuff just gets converted to SDI, and they sort of go out and everything in their production is SDI. We're NDI here, so a lot of what we do sort of all gets converted to NDI as opposed to direct HDMI connections. But I know people have used those successfully, but I don't have personal experience using it. So, but thanks for asking that. That is an important question for a lot of folks dealing with different content. So James is saying most of his presenters also use PowerPoint slides. And how would you set it up so they could see the slides and advance the slides? Okay, so again, that's another great question, because it's another way we were thinking of potentially packaging this. The way I would set that up is, because we're creating a custom feed for the remote presenter. Actually, what I will do right now is we'll jump back to the vMix interface, and I'll show you exactly how I would have done this. And we can sort of just do this pretty quickly. So if this is my presenter coming in, and I'm going to set this up as a return feed, what I would probably do is I would just, we'll do this on no sort of background, but I will take the key out of this guy. So I'll come here. Let me do what I'm doing here. So I'll come over here and I'll turn the key off here. We'll shut that off. Then what I would do is, in this, when I'm sending this to an output, I would actually add another input here. We'll just make this a color input. And we'll do something that isn't just black. So there, that's good. And then what I do is, with that as an input, I would go and start to layer these in. So I would take my prompter feed, I would put this in here, and put this as a layer. And with this set up as where's my prompter feed? There we go. Then I would just scale this. And so what I basically start to do, wrong layer here. So I'd scale this down and, sort of position this. So what I'd probably do is I would give them, if they needed a prompter and PowerPoints, I would do something where, you were sort of 45, like just under, position this, where I needed it. They could have PowerPoints coming in, and I'd put that down here as another layer. And then even if they needed their own sort of video coming in, I could go and, set up a layer for them. Let's turn around and we'll put in the presenter riffing, and we'll just sort of move this over and size it down. So this would give you an idea of sort of how I would probably do this. And because this is coming back as a unique feed to them, you could do all of that. And give them a visual. So, maybe you'd want the prompter to be half the screen, and maybe you'd want to set this up where they could see enough of their slide here to know what they have to say. And then I would just use something like, internet clicker or something, which would let them send the signals to control that sort of remotely. Or do something, we've shown this before, where if you can port forward, you could do something where you could even let them control something in vMix, where they could just advance or go back on slides, because you have the vMix interface that will let you basically control your vMix session. And it's its own control interface. So sort of a quick and dirty here, but that's probably exactly how I would do something like this, and just make that. You could also do things like timers and other stuff, which I didn't do in here, but that's another way to sort of keep people on track. If you turn around and give them a countdown timer and put that on the screen as well, that's one of the benefits of a sort of composited screen with multiple elements to it. Hope that helped. So, All right. So, uh, so there are, like I said, there are a lot of different ways you could do this. I chose to do it with the overlay, but I think this is a completely valid way. Automation, always good to see you. Thank you. It's always great to have you here. So I think this is the overlay is one good way if you want it to feel like they are talking to, if you want them to feel like they're talking to and engaging an audience. So having that be your background can be valuable. But the other way, if you have somebody who sort of doesn't need that sort of audience feedback in order to present well, then doing something which gives them more of an informational screen, with a section with themselves so they could see, make sure they're looking correct, and then with their slides or whatever they're presenting and a prompt, that could work very well also. So you're quite welcome, James. Thank you. So, all right. So I know this was a fairly straightforward topic today. And, there were some general underlying concepts in it as well. So hopefully you found it useful. And as always, I really appreciate, when you join us on the live stream, and definitely when you hang out for the post show, because this is a more comfortable time in the show where I think everybody can feel at ease to just ask questions and sort of anything general. So always good to have you guys here. So, all right, since we don't have any more comments, I just want to say we will be back in, as I said, 2 weeks and for another show. And until then, to all of you, be safe, be well. See you then. Take care.